Hello everyone, my name is Zenitsu and I'm back with another Digimon Spoiler Sunday video. So this is the time of the week where I take a look at all of the spoilers that we got and, well, talk about them. So let's get into the spoilers because we got quite a lot to talk about this week, and we even got some new promos to talk about as well. So starting off, we have Metal Goromon X Antibody. So Metal Goromon X Antibody here is going to be your stereotypical level 6 in terms of stats, nothing too special to talk about there. He can also digivolve on top of a Metal Gurumon for 1, so there's that because, well, he's an X Antibody and that just seems like that's what the X Antibodies have been doing. And then on top of that, he has 2 abilities of his own. His first ability is a when digivolving ability where we get to unsuspend this Digimon, which is already pretty good, so that way you could attack with your Metal Gurumon, then digivolve it for 1 and unsuspend the Digimon to get a second attack off, and then on top of that, this Digimon gains blocker until the end of the opponent's turn. So you could use this offensively or defensively, whether it's going to be to actually get the extra attack off, or to end your turn to unsuspend this Digimon and gain a Mega level blocker. So I do like the flexibility that they're trying to give with this when digivolving ability, and this isn't specifically locked to the X Antibody mechanic, so that way you could use it however you feel like, and you don't need to worry about utilizing X Antibodies if you want to get this ability off. So I do like that first ability quite a lot, and then on top of that, he has a secondary ability where during your turn once per turn, when this Digimon becomes unsuspended, if this Digimon has Metal Gurumon or X Antibody in its Digivolution source, then all of the opponent's Digimon with the lowest level gets bounced back to their hand. So this is the X Antibody mechanic where it just wants to work with Metal Gurumon or X Antibody as a card in its inheritable sources, and it's a pretty okay upside to just basically bounce anything that's the weakest on their field, which is pretty strong. So I think this is a pretty solid secondary ability just because it's level based and that could return lots of different targets. The only thing that right now it doesn't really affect a whole lot is going to be the D-Reapers, but outside of that, this seems like it's a pretty strong ability, especially if they only have one Digimon on their field, then it's just going to generically bounce that back to their hand. But if they have a wide field of Digimon all of the same level, then it bounces all of them, so this is just a very strong ability to be playing around with just for that level of removal. Next up, we have Kokumon X Antibody. So Kokumon X Antibody is another level 3 X Antibody Digimon, so he has the on-play and when digivolving ability where you get to reveal the top 3 cards of your deck, add 1 Digimon with Insectoid or Machine in its traits, and 1 X Antibody card among them into your hand, and then the rest go to the bottom. So this is your stereotypical digger for either the X Antibody card, machines, or insectoids, so this is looking to be pretty good considering the on-play and when digivolution just gives it extra flexibility because you can digivolve this on top of a Kokumon for 0 if you really wanted to. This is just a nice card to just use for various different purposes depending on what type of deck you're trying to build and how you're trying to use your cards. Next, we have a new Digitama in the form of Goromon. So Goromon is going to be the black Digitama of the set, and this is looking to be a pretty okay Digitama to use. So it has the inheritable ability where during the opponent's turn, while the Digimon has blocker, it gains plus 1000 DP. So it's just supporting that stereotypical black blockers type of strategy where it's just generically DP boosting your Digimon, except the important thing is it's during the opponent's turn, so that way you're not actually gaining the buff during your turn, and that could be pretty good, so you could try to use your blockers to try to wall out the opponent with this ability as low as a Digitama slot. So I don't necessarily know how relevant black blockers is going to be to make this card really good or not, but it seems interesting enough of a Digitama to use anyway. Next, we have a new black option card, and I actually really love this black option card because this option card adds lots of the extra power to what black machines was kind of lacking before. So this is a zero-costed black option card, and it has the main ability where you get to trash 1 card with a cyborg or machine from your hand and have all of your level 6 Digimon with machine in their traits gain the rush ability and the on-play ability of gaining blitz. So this just allows you to actually efficiently use your cards like Machinedramon, where ordinarily you'd hard play it and then pass the turn. just because he's going to cost a lot. Even if he has the ability to reduce his own cost or gain you memory back, it might not be enough to actually hard play the card and use the card that turn. So this is a card that just allows you to actually use those types of cards, and that adds a lot of extra viability to those types of cards, just because, well, the Machinedramon deck hasn't really been doing a whole lot in Japan as of BT08, but I think that a card like this actually can make something like that a little bit more viable, just because you'll pass the turn to the opponent, giving them a decent amount of memory and still being able to utilize your card to its utmost potential the turn that it comes into play. So I think this is going to be a very powerful card for those types of decks to be playing around with. Then on top of that, it also has a nice security ability where you get to trash a card with Cyborg or Machine in its traits from your hand to delete one of the opponent's Digimon with a play cost less than or equal to the trash card's play cost. So this just is another really decent removal card for black, and even though yes, you are discarding a card, that might not necessarily be the worst thing in the world, because sometimes you want to fill up your trash with specific cards, or you just need to get rid of a body off the field, so you just need to sacrifice a little bit of your cards and your tempo in order to get rid of theirs. So I think this is going to be a pretty decent card for those black machine decks to run going forward. But speaking of black cyborgs and black machines, we have some new black machines to be interacting with and playing around with. So first up, we have Fujiman. So Fujiman is a level 6 green and black card, and it has, well, average stats, so nothing too special to talk about there. But he does have a new ability that actually activates from our hand. So it states that in our hand, we could use this main ability, where if we have a Digimon with Justimon or RideinMon in its name, then we get to put this card at the bottom of one of those Digimon's Digivolution sources by paying 1. So for 1 memory, we get to shove this card from our hand to the bottom of either Justimon or RideinMon, which is pretty good considering he's a level 6 that actually has an inheritable ability, but he does have an ability of his own, where when you Digivolve into this card, you get to trash out 1 card with Machine or Cyborg in its trace from your hand to suspend one of the opponent's Digimon. So that's already pretty okay. It's not super amazing, but it's not like the worst thing in the world. It's just a very stereotypical green thing to do. And then on top of that, it's inheritable ability, which is what we're actually trying to gain out of the card, considering it wants us to discard the card to put it underneath either Justimon or RideinMon, is his when attacking inheritable, where we get to suspend one of the opponent's Digimon with 5000 DP or less. Then that Digimon can't unsuspend during the opponent's unsuspend phase. So it's just doing another very stereotypical green thing, and it's being a pretty okay Digimon. The important thing is it's a level 6 with an inheritable ability, so that way any level 7s or level 6s that this can be used with is looking to be pretty spicy. Next, we have Rajinman. So Rajinman is another one of those Digimon that's going to be fitting within that subset of cards where it's going to be interacting with Justimon and RideinMon for being a level 6 cyborg. Except this time, this is a yellow-black card, so it could fit in nicely into yellow and black decks, it could fit nicely into those cyborg and machine decks, and it's another really good card for its abilities that's interacting with yellow for splashing black. So what this card is doing is he has that same ability where you get to discard him for 1 to put him underneath Justimon or RideinMon from your hand, which is okay. And then on top of that, he has a when Digivolving ability where we get to trash 1 machine or cyborg and its traits from our hand to have one of the opponent's Digimon get minus 4000 DP until the end of the turn. So DP reduction is already really, really strong, so the fact that this plays with DP reduction is making this card a little bit better than the one that we just saw before. And then its inheritable ability also is a really good when attacking ability, where one of the opponent's Digimon gets minus 4000 DP until the end of the turn, so it's just a very solid card to be using all around. But the fact that it is yellow and black means that we have lots of different ways to use it, whether it's, again, with RideinMon or Justimon, or if we're going to be using this with some various other level 7s, just because it is fulfilling both yellow and black and is both identities. And then next in the cycle, we have Tsujinmon. So Tsujinmon is doing that very similar thing, except this time it is a blue-black Digimon. So we already saw a little bit of blue-black synergy, so that's going to be really interesting to figure out what is the better combination of cards, what cards we want to use, and what abilities we want to use, on top of what cards this is going to be paired up with. But it's doing that very similar thing, where it has the ability where you could pay 1 from your hand to put this card under Justimon or RideinMon, as we saw before with the other two, and he has a when digivolving ability of his own where, we trash a machine or cyborg from our hand to bounce one of the opponent's level 4 or lower Digimon back to the bottom of the owner's deck. So tuck abilities are usually really, really strong, so this is going to be a very powerful card to be playing around with just because of that tuck ability. Yes, it is on the lower level Digimon, but sometimes you just need to get lower level Digimon off the field, and this is one of the better ways that we have to do it with. And then its inheritable ability is basically the same as its when digivolving ability, except it's a when attacking ability. We get to return one of the opponent's level 4 or lower Digimon back to their hand instead of the deck. So it's still getting rid of the Digimon off the field, which is what you want at the end of the day, even though, yes, it does kind of suck that they do get to reuse the card because it's going back to the hand and not to the bottom of their deck, but it's still just a decent card to be playing around with just because it's fitting on theme with whatever the deck is trying to do, on top of having 2 really decent color typings. And then to complete this whole little package, we have RideinMon. So RideinMon is a level 6 black Digimon, and it could digivolve off of a level 5 for 4 or a level 6 for 2. So that way you could actually use all of those Digimon before to digivolve up into them, then digivolve into a RideinMon, then try to shove more inheritable sources underneath the RideinMon with all of their abilities that trigger from the hand. But this card has a really decent on-play ability if you want to just ignore all of that and just hard play the card, and it also has a when digivolving ability that's the same, where you get to place 1 Fujiman, Tsujinmon, and Rajinman from your trash to the bottom of this Digimon's Digivolution source in any order, and gain 1 memory for each card placed. So it's just one of those cards where you just want to hard play it or digivolve up into it, and then it's going to give you the memory backup for playing around with its little package and engine. And then it also has a when attacking ability of its own to coincide with all of the when attacking inheritable abilities of all of the other Digimon, where if the total of colors of level 6 in this Digimon's Digivolution source is 3 or more, then it'll gain plus 3000 DP until the end of the opponent's next turn, and if you have 4 or more, then one of your opponent's Digimon de-digivolves 1. So the de-digivolve 1 isn't really anything too spicy or special. It's a little bit annoying and could be decent, but compared to some of the other forms of removal, it's not that great. But the 3000 DP boost during the opponent's turn and your turn as well is really, really good, and as we saw with the option, we could give this card Rush and Blitz, so that way we could use it the turn that we play it if we hard play it, or most of the time what you're going to want to do is just digivolve it just to make it a very cheap and efficient digivolution. So this is going to be a pretty interesting and spicy little subset of cards, and I'm excited to see what people are going to come up with for this type of a deck. Next up, we have Divermon. So Divermon isn't really anything too special. This is just a vanilla card that's following in the same footsteps as Bautmon as we saw in BT03, so nothing too special to talk about here. Next, we have Greymon X Antibody. So Greymon X Antibody is looking to be a very interesting card. I want to say he fits nicely into the Shine Greymon deck just because of everything this card is doing, but the way this card works, it's almost like he's trying to replace Shine Greymon in a sense. So what this card is doing is, well, yes, he is a level 5 that is both red and yellow. So he's already looking to be pretty good just because we already knew that Shine Greymon had some red-yellow synergy there already. And then on top of that, he can digivolve on top of a Greymon for 1, or digivolve for 4 off of red or yellow level 4s. So there's already some decent flexibility on how he could digivolve the card there, just because, yes, he is an X Antibody, and on top of that, he has a really powerful when digivolving ability that, like I said, kind of makes him want to replace Shine Greymon in a sense. So his when digivolving ability states that we get to place 1 red or yellow tamer from our hand for free, so that's already really good because we want efficient ways to play our tamers, and that's kind of what Shine Greymon is all about, is just trying to play your tamers as efficiently as possible. So I like the idea where you could use this in combination with the Greymons to essentially play 2 tamers for free, 1 off of the first Rise and 1 off of this Rise. And then on top of that, if this Digimon has Greymon or X Antibody in its Digivolution source, then one of the opponent's Digimon gets minus 2000 DP until the end of the turn for each red and yellow tamer on our field. So this is, again, just a really decent ability that's kind of acting like a mini Shine Greymon, where the more tamers that we have on the field, the more powerful this ability becomes. And yes, it is only on one Digimon, but it's still a pretty decent card to just try to remove one body off of the field, just because this card is also a really powerful level 5 Digimon to be playing around with, on top of any buffs that he could have from his inheritable sources. So he's looking to be very, very good for that ability alone, and on top of that, he has another ability where during your turn, this Digimon gets plus 1000 DP for each tamer we have in play. It's not even specifically saying red or yellow, it's just as long as we have a tamer in play, he'll gain plus 1000 DP for each of them. So this is going to be a very powerful level 5 Digimon to be playing around with, and I'm excited to see how Shine Greymon is going to adapt to this card, if they're even going to bother adapting this card. But speaking of Rise Greymon and the Shine Greymon deck, we have a new option card in the form of Sunrise Buster. So Sunrise Buster is a 5-costed yellow and red option card, so you do need yellow and red on the field in order to use this card, but again, it's supposed to be played in tandem with the Rise Greymon that we just saw, and it's not like it's going to be that hard to set up various different tamers to get the condition on being able to use this option card off. But what this option card is doing is it has the main ability where we get to place one red or yellow tamer card from our hand for free, and then one of the opponent's Digimon gets minus 3000 for each red or yellow tamer that we have in play. So it's just another really powerful removal option card that's allowing us to play our tamers for free, which is usually really, really good, with the security ability of activating its main, which is where you want to see this card more often than not, because you can have a very wide field of tamers, use this card from the security, and then get more value and more tempo out, just because we could set up more tamers and try to delete the opponent's Digimon all at the same time. So I think this card is going to be a very fun and powerful card to be playing around with for that style of deck, but again, I don't exactly know if they're going to want to try to adopt it, just because they've already been playing with hybrids for so long, and the hybrids just seem to be doing really, really good and doing lots of work for Shine Greymon. Next, we have Piranhamon. So Piranhamon is a level 5 Digimon that hard plays for 6, 7000 DP, and has the Rush ability. So this is pretty interesting considering we haven't really seen Rush that often, and when we did see it, it was mostly on a lot of yellow cards. So the fact that we're seeing a blue card with Rush is very, very welcome, because this card brings a little bit more life into the whole separating your evolution stacks into separate Digimon, just because you want to try to use this card in combination with those cards to separate this to get a free Digimon with Rush out. So I think that's probably the best way to use this card, but if you do just have enough memory or the ability to gain enough memory, then you could just literally hard play this card and swing out right away. So it's a decent card to think about utilizing for very specific purposes, it seems like. Next, we have Sanglotmon. So Sanglotmon is a level 4 purple Digimon, stats aren't anything too special, and it's just interacting with the whole Digivolution from the Crave and interacting with the undead and dark animal types that we saw on a couple of cards previously in the spoiler season. So its inheritable ability states that when attacking, this Digimon can evolve into an undead or dark animal type Digimon from our trash by paying its evolution cost. So it's just doing what we thought that it would be doing, interacting with the undeads and dark animals, and it's really interesting to see us Digivolving in various different ways. So we haven't really seen a whole lot of Digivolving from the trash, so I'm excited to see where this archetype is going to go and how they're going to support it in the future, because Digivolving from the trash seems to be really, really strong in my opinion, just because now you don't necessarily need it to be in your hand in order to actually Digivolve. Next, we have a new version of Bearmon. So this new version of Bearmon is just your stereotypical value-efficient vanilla card. Its stats aren't anything too special, 2 to hard play, 0 to evo, 3000 DP. It's just a good stat line to have, and it's nice to see that we get it on a new Bearmon for black. Next, we have Omnimon Merciful Mode. So Omnimon Merciful Mode, the big thing to note is he's not a secret rare, he is an SR. So I'm expecting this card to be like $5 to $10 on average, but money aside, this is looking to be a very playable card for lots of different decks. So we do have the flexibility on how this Digimon can evolve, which is one of the more attractive things about the card, because you could Digivolve them off of an Omnimon for 3, or you could Digivolve them for 6 off of red, blue, yellow, or green. So that's just a lot of different colors that he's playing around with and interacting with. On top of the fact that anything that has Omnimon, you could just use him in combination with that as well. And then he has 2 really powerful abilities of his own on top of having some pretty decent stats. So his first ability is a when Digivolving ability. You get to delete one of the opponent's Digimon for each card with a Mega in its traits in this Digimon's Digivolution source. So the more Megas you have underneath him, the stronger this when Digivolving ability becomes. And then on top of that, you get to return 10 cards from the opponent's trash to the bottom of their deck in any order. And this is kind of like a really weird ability to have, but it's acting as an anti-purple ability to make it so they have to try to reload their trash and set up some of their cards again, so that way you're kind of trying to deny them on some of their abilities for purple. And then on top of that, he has another ability where at the start of your turn, you get to trash the top card of this Digimon's Digivolution source, and if you do, you get to trash the top card of the opponent's security stack. So this is basically like a ticking time bomb where the longer this card stays around and the more inheritable sources he has, the more security he's going to tear apart from the opponent for literally doing nothing if the opponent can't get rid of this card. I do think there is a lot of removal to make this secondary ability a little bit not super great, but I do think it's still a strong ability to have on a card just because of that passive do nothing and get rewarded type of ability that it has. So I think as a whole, this is going to be a very spicy Omnimon to be playing around with, and I'm excited to see what decks are going to adopt this and how this card is actually going to be used. Next, we have a new version of Alekmon. So this new version of Alekmon is, well, not really doing anything too special. It is just a blah vanilla card for being a level 3 green Digimon. Next, we have Goromon X Antibody. So we already saw that we were getting some of the Goromon X Antibody cards, so this is just continuing with what we thought we would be getting. Except I actually do like this X Antibody a little bit more than some of the others. I do wish some of these X Antibody level 5s did have inheritable abilities, so that way you wanted to Digivolve on top of them, but this is still a pretty decent card to be playing around with nonetheless. So it could Digivolve for 0 on top of another Groumon, which we do have some pretty decent Groumons to be playing around with, but the big difference between this and some of the other level 5s is it actually just Digivolves normally for 3 on top of a level 4 Digimon. So we're not actually losing anything for having a decent X Antibody Digimon in our deck. And then on top of that, it's when Digivolving ability states that until the end of your opponent's turn, 2 of the opponent's Digimon gain the on-delete ability of losing 1 memory. So basically, when you try to use this card to delete the opponent's Digimon, then you're going to be essentially gaining 2 memory, even though the opponent is going to be losing the 2 memory. It's still just a very powerful ability just to have to give to the opponent's Digimon, because the Alekmon style of deck just has lots of different ways of deleting lots of the opponent's Digimon. Then on top of that, if this Digimon has Groumon or X Antibody in its Digivolution source, then you could choose any number of the opponent's Digimon whose DP adds up to a total of 6,000 or less and delete them. So he himself has the ability to try to delete the opponent's Digimon that he's giving the debuff to make his evolution a little bit more worthwhile, or to make the evolution of your Alekmon a little bit more worthwhile too, just because of that debuff that he's initially giving him. So I think this is going to be a pretty fun and interesting card to be playing around with. Next, we have Atomic Megalo Blaster. So Atomic Megalo Blaster is basically doing almost the exact same thing as Atomic Blaster, except stronger. So yes, it does cost a total of 1 more memory, but at the cost of 1 more memory, it can delete up to a total of 10,000 DP or less of Digimon on the opponent's field. So this is just a very powerful card that's basically just doing the exact same thing as Atomic Blaster, except better. And then its security ability activates its main ability, so it's just a pretty good removal option card to be playing around with, especially since Alekmon has the ability to increase the range in which you could delete the opponent's Digimon. Next, we have a new version of Megadramon. So I actually really do like what this Megadramon is doing, and this card definitely seems like it wants to be played with the machines or Greymon based decks that we already had in the game. So what this card is doing is it's a black and red level 5 that can Digivolve for 4 off of black or red and has 8,000 DP, so pretty decent stats. And then on top of that, he has a when Digivolving ability where you get to delete one of the opponent's Digimon or Tamers with a play cost of 3 or less. So yes, we do have more Tamer hate in the game, which is always awkwardly welcome, considering Tamers, we didn't really have a whole lot of ways of interacting with them in the past, and it seems like now we have a little bit more ways of interacting with them to actually try to have some counterplay for the opponent playing lots of Tamers. And then on top of that, he has a nice inheritable ability of when attacking, when this Digimon has Machine or Dragonkin in its traits, then you get to delete one of the opponent's Digimon or Tamers with a play cost of 3 or less. So it's just more Tamer hate and more deletion effects for the opponent's low-level Digimon, which is generally not necessarily a bad thing, and I think this card is going to be a very played card if hybrids are still going to be dominating the meta. Next, we have a new version of Tapermon, except now Tapermon is a black Digimon, but he also can Digivolve off of a red level 2, so we already have lots of different ways to play him, and this card is going to be able to go into lots of different decks, considering black-red is one of the more supported two-color typings. And then on top of that, he has this nice inheritable ability, where during all turns, while this Digimon has 2 or more colors, then it gets plus 1000 DP, so if you're just using this in a two-color deck, then it's going to be a very powerful inheritable ability that you want to see, just because that permanent 1000 DP boost is very, very strong. Next up, we have a new blue option card in the form of Metal Storm. So Metal Storm is a 7-costed blue option, and this has a pretty decent ability where it actually can reduce its own cost. So it has the ability where when you would use this card, if you have a Digimon with X Antibody in its Digivolution source, then you get to reduce the memory of using this card by 2. So if you're using this in an X Antibody based deck, then it's actually going to cost you only 5 instead of 7, which is a little bit more efficient. And then it has the main ability where you get to return one of the opponent's level 6 or lower Digimon back to their hand, which is already pretty decent. For 7, it's a little bit less decent. And then on top of that, then you get to unsuspend one of your Digimon with Gurumon in its name. So this really wants to be played in a Gurumon tribal-based deck, just because it's stating any Gurumon in its name, which is pretty decent, especially with the Metal Gurumon that we just saw that's interacting with X Antibodies and other Gurumons. So I think this is going to be a pretty good card for that deck, and it has the security ability of activating its main, so it's just pretty decent of a card overall, just because unsuspending during the opponent's turn could take away some of the interaction that the opponent have trying to delete the Digimon if they're trying to aggress into your security instead. So I think this is going to be a pretty decent card to be playing around with for the Metal Goromon X Antibody deck. Next, we have a new Digitama for blue, and it is going to be Jellymon's Digitama, it seems like, which is going to be Puyoyomon. So this is looking to be a pretty okay Digitama to be using. It's not doing anything too special or spicy. Its inheritable ability states that during your turn, once per turn, when you add a card back to your hand by card effects, so basically drawing by a card effect or anything that's self-bouncing, back to your hand, then this Digimon gains plus 1000 DP until the end of the turn, so it's just a pretty okay at trying to DP boost some of your Digimon, which blue might have better ways of doing that depending on the type of deck that you're playing around with, but it's not a bad Digitama to be playing around with as a whole. Most people will generally just elect to play engine-based cards on their Digitama slots anyway, so I don't exactly think this card's going to see a whole lot of play. It's just a decent Digitama to think about if you just want to try to gain some extra DP. And then the last big card that we got spoiled from the set is going to be Pangemon X Antibody. So Pangemon X Antibody is, well, a card that's playing around with that Leomon deck that they really seem to want to make. So what this card is doing is it is a blue-green Digimon that can Digivolve for 3 off of blue and green as a level 5. So blue and green already had lots of good synergy and support before just because of all of the Imperial stuff. So maybe some of that stuff could be useful in here. And we already do have blue and green Leomons already in the game that we could use this with. And the interesting thing is, yes, this Digimon can Digivolve off of Pangemon for 0. Most likely you're probably not going to use that ability, considering there's no real reason to play this with the X Antibody stuff as a whole, but this Digimon also's name is treated as Leomon. So this card does also count as a Leomon if you want to use it in the Leomon deck, which really seems like where this card is trying to be pushed into. And then on top of that, it has the powerful ability where during both players' turns, when this Digimon would be deleted by battle, then you get to play one Leomon from this Digimon's Digivolution source for free. So obviously it wants you to Digivolve this on top of some Leomons, so that way you could use this ability to be able to just basically have a cascading stack of Leomons coming out of this Digimon. So I think that's just the direction that they want to take with the Leomon deck, is just have this type of ability, which I don't think is a good thing or a bad thing. It just seems very interesting because, well, Leomon is a Digimon that just wants to be deleted, it seems like. And then on top of all of the new spoilers that we got, we even did get some new promo cards revealed to us. Now, the text on some of these cards are a little bit small, so these translations aren't necessarily going to be 100% accurate, but it's a good rough estimate on what these cards are going to be doing. But we do have another new yearly anniversary pack, and these cards look to be pretty decent to be thinking about utilizing for various different decks. So first up, we have a new version of Metal Greymon Alterus mode. So this time, Metal Greymon Alterus mode is going to be acting a little bit different than the version that we saw before, all the way back in BT05. So he does have the native Digivolution cost of 3 on top of a level 4 Digimon, so he doesn't have that whole double Digivolution method where we have different ways to Digivolve him, but he does have the ability where we could Digivolve him for 0 on top of a Metal Greymon. And on top of that, this card is also treated as a Metal Greymon, so it's looking to be a pretty decent replacement on how we could Digivolve him differently. And then on top of all of that, he has a really powerful when Digivolving ability, where if we have a Tamer in play, then we get to delete one of the opponent's Digimon with 4000 DP or less, so a very stereotypical Red ability to just kind of delete the opponent's Digimon. But what we actually would want to use this card for is his inheritable ability, where during all turns, when in effect it would delete this Digimon with Greymon or Omnimon in its name, or return it to the hand or deck, then we get to trash it 2 Digimon with the same level from its Digivolution source to prevent the Digimon from leaving play. So we already saw this ability on Kokumon X Antibody, so the more instances of this ability, the better that kind of having a larger stack becomes, so that way you have multiple different levels and multiple different same level Digimon to keep your big Digimon around, which is usually a good thing because there's just a lot of removal in the game, and any way we have to keep our Digimon around is usually a good thing, especially if we could use this ability multiple times. So I really think this is going to be a decent card to use for that ability alone. Next, we have a Gurumon Sagittarius mode, which is basically the foil of what the Metal Greymon Alterus mode was doing. So it has the same type of effects, where it can Digivolve for 0 on top of Gurumon. It's also counted as a Gurumon. It has the when Digivolving ability to bounce one of the opponent's level 3 or lower Digimon as long as you have a Tamer in play, and it has the same inheritable ability except for Gurumons and Omnimons this time. So it's just a really decent inheritable ability and card to use all around for those style of decks. Next, we have a new version of Bautmon. So we are going to be getting a little bit of Pulsemon support, and this card is actually looking to be pretty good for a Pulsemon based deck. So what this card is doing is it has the nice native ability where during your turn, when this Digimon would Digivolve into a Shaman or Wizard in its traits, then we may trash 3 cards from the top of our security stack, and for each card trashed this way, we get to reduce the memory of the Digivolution by 1. So it's just trying to get our security into the right threshold, so that way we could put ourselves within a particular range for our abilities to trigger, and this is looking to be pretty good because it allows us to also reduce the evolution of the Digimon we're Digivolving into, which most likely is going to end up being Tsujinmon from BT07, because this card's inheritable ability is what we actually really want to gain out of the card, where it has a when attacking once per turn. If we have 3 cards in our security stack exactly, then we get to unsuspend this Digimon. So this is really powerful because that way we reduce our security, so that way we could put ourselves within that threshold. Tsujinmon will have a reduced evolution, refill up our security, and then Tsujinmon will be able to multi-attack with security attack plus on top of any other abilities that we could give him. So I think this is going to be a pretty decent card to be using for those Pulsemon based decks, but the fact that it's interacting with just Shamans and Wizards is really, really interesting because we could use this potentially with various other level 6s. Next up, we have a new version of Okumon. So Okumon is trying to support the Insectoid deck that they really seem to be trying to push recently. So what this card is doing for that deck is it has the nice ability where during your turn, when this Digimon would Digivolve into a Digimon with Insectoids in its traits, then all of the opponent's Digimon get the ability where during all turns, when this Digimon becomes suspended, then you get to lose 1 memory until the end of the opponent's turn. So this de-incentivizes them from wanting to attack with their Digimon because otherwise they're going to lose some memory. So it's kind of similar to Ice Wall in that respect. And then on top of that, it also triggers during our turn. So we could try to force suspend the opponent's Digimon down to basically reduce the cost of whatever we're using because the opponent is going to be losing memory, which effectively means we're going to be gaining that memory. So I think this is a pretty spicy ability to be playing around with as a whole for that style of deck. And this is a really good card to use for that style of deck too, because its inheritable ability is very, very powerful, where during your turn, while this Digimon has Insectoid in its traits, then it gains the piercing ability, which is generally something green really, really wants, because it just wants to try to beat up the opponent's Digimon and be rewarded for doing so. And there's no better ability to reward you for beating up the opponent's Digimon than dealing security damage to actually try to advance the game and close it out as quickly and efficiently as you can. Next, we have a new version of Deltamon. So this new version of Deltamon is going to be a red-black 2-color card, level 4. Stats aren't anything too special, although it does cost 3 to Evo on top of a level 3, which is a little bit more on the expensive side, but the fact that this card has a nice inheritable and native ability makes it a decent card to want to think about using. So it has the nice ability where during your turn, when this Digimon would Digivolve into a Digimon with composite in its traits or multiple different colors, then you get to reduce the cost of that evolution by 1. So it's just a pretty okay ability to try to reduce your Digivolutions. And then on top of that, it has an inheritable ability of when attacking, where for each of this Digimon's colors, you get to delete one of the opponent's Digimon with a DP of 3000 or less than this Digimon's DP. So it's just another decent card at just trying to remove threats off of the opponent's field with for your higher level Digimon, making this card just a pretty okay card to be using. And then the last promo that we got is going to be a new version of Wizardmon. So this new version of Wizardmon is looking to be a pretty decent card to be playing around with for all of those self-milling strategies. So it has the nice native ability where when this card is trashed from your deck, you get to gain 1 memory. So that's just already pretty good because we can't necessarily control what we're self-milling half the time. And when we do self-mill this card, then we do get some sort of benefit, which seems to be what those style of decks and what Purple generally wants to do, is reward you for doing the type of negative actions that you've been doing. And then on top of that, he has a nice inheritable ability where when attacking, you get to reveal 1 purple card from your hand and place it on the top of your deck. So that way you could selectively try to put back the cards that you want to put into your trash by self-milling it, and I think this is a pretty decent card to set up those types of strategies, so that way you could kind of control and manipulate what you're trying to self-mill to trigger their abilities when they're self-milled. But yeah, for the most part, that's all of the spoilers that we got this week, and we got lots of new and interesting cards to play around with and think about theory crafting for lots of different decks. It seems like BT09 is trying to do a lot for a lot of different decks, which is always really, really welcome and exciting to try to give some new life and blood into them, on top of having some really powerful new decks trying to form, and I really do think that BT09 is going to be a very fun and exciting set to be playing around with. On top of the fact that we do have these new anniversary promos that also can help push and propel certain decks forward, so I think the game is moving in a relatively positive direction as a whole. So that's all I really have for this video. As always, feel free to tell me your thoughts down in the comments below, and down in the description below are a couple of different ways you could support me and the channel. So I do have a TCG Player affiliate link, so when you use that link to buy cards off of TCG Player, then some of that money will go to supporting me and the channel. I also do make and sell playmats over on Overcard Gamers on Facebook, so when you buy a playmat with my design, then some of that money will also go to help supporting me and the channel. And on top of all of that, I do have a Twitch account over on twitch.tv/Zenitsu, so giving me a follow and a subscription also helps support me there, and I do play Digimon on top of various other games on that platform as well.
So thank you everyone for watching, and as always, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more content, and I'll see you in the next video.